Please welcome Professor John Defterios, Senior Advisor, APCO Worldwide, and Professor of Business at New York University, Abu Dhabi.
Okay, good afternoon. We wanted to wait till the lights went up for us to speak. You're okay there? Perfect. It was a nice presentation by Jean Pagano for the Red Sea development, which is so vital into one of the giga projects here in Saudi Arabia. So it was good to see that even behind the stage on the screen. This is a very important issue because it's the link between AI, automation, and job creation for the future. And I was trying to set the context for this debate and roundtable that we have this morning. Prior to the pandemic, I would say this is one of the top 5 subjects in the world. How much disruption there would be in the labor market due to the advent of AI and the pervasive automation in the manufacturing sector. You've seen surveys suggesting it could wipe out 750 million jobs over the next decade. But there's another side to the coin as well. Some displacement in jobs, some creation in jobs, and if done correctly, high-paying jobs at the same time. But there's for example, here in the kingdom, there's a trifecta working on this, headed by His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, that has the Minister of Industry working with the Minister of Education, for example, and the Minister of Labor to fine-tune what's needed in the marketplace. And we have the great honor to have the former president of Estonia, who left office just over 2 weeks ago, with the Estonian model, what worked there and what could be adopted here in Saudi Arabia. Let's give a warm welcome to Kersti, Kaljulaid, former president of Estonia, and His Excellency Bandar Alkhorayef, the Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources. Warm welcome to them.
Hello, everybody.
I didn't even ask the question,
Kersti. You didn't. But,
I don't need to. No, before we start, and no jokes aside here, because we have 20 minutes, I want us to be hyper-focused in this. Is this concern about technology and talent and disruption real, or could actually look at it in a different way, where it could be a jump starter for job creation? And what are the tools to make that work? And then we'll go to the Saudi example.
Yes,
thanks.
As you already asked in your introduction, exactly this. I was thinking, 15 years ago, for example, when my teenage daughter would have come to me and said, I want to make money by traveling and posting photos, what would you have said to your daughter? Yeah. You would have said, get real, learn to be a lawyer or doctor, something like. Yet we know there are many traveling YouTubers who make money, and they wouldn't be able to make money if there were not technology underlying and supporting what they're doing. Similarly, for example, let's take an extreme case, a seriously handicapped person, an autistic person who is afraid of other human beings, but for some reason, let's say, likes knitting red socks. Previously, they would have been on social support. Now, the world is their market, and they don't have to see anybody because they can do it online. So they're perfectly self-sustainable because there is always enough takers for red socks among 8 billion people. See, we should not be afraid that technology destroys our jobs. Yes, it does destroy some, but they are not worth doing. They are the jobs which made people behave like machines. But we have a competitive advantage over machines, which will always be ours. We are compassionate human beings. And if you think where in the world money is made nowadays, also based on digital technologies, it's exactly person-to-person communication, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything. This is about being a human being to another human being. And this cannot be taken from us. And it creates new jobs. And this should be our outlook. I mean, yes, the old jobs will be lost, frankly speaking. We are not sorry. For example, in Estonia, when electronic tax board started in 1997, 60% of the jobs were destroyed in our tax offices. But the unemployment didn't result. I mean, educated people, everybody needed advisors, bookkeepers, accountants. No problem whatsoever. Only one warning, please keep your labor market open as well, so that flexibility is allowed on the labor market.
Okay, this is an interesting challenge for Saudi Arabia, Mr. Alkhorayef. You had Saudization targets, which industry had to meet, and you're working in the, of course, as the chair of the Ministry of Industry and Minerals. So you have industry saying, I'd like to meet those Saudization targets, but I got to have a skilled workforce. And this is a priority in the 2030 vision, is it not, with His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman saying, I want to get the calibration right between our schools, our labor market as it is today, and what is industry saying? So how do you get the calibration balance, do you think?
I think it's very interesting times. I mean, if we look at really, is jobs, are jobs going to be replaced? The answer is no, and this is something we have already, I think, is behind us. Now, what we need to think about is how can we create the right skill sets, enable our people to be ready for the jobs of the future. And I remember in 1998, I went for a visit to Japan to one of our suppliers, and during that visit, they had this new equipment, and at the end of the equipment name, they had AI. And I asked, what does this AI stand for? And he said, it means artificial intelligence. This equipment is supposed to replace the eyes of the printer. I used to be in the printing and packaging industry, and the whole idea is to bring the thinking of the printer as an artificial intelligence to help printers worldwide to rely on machine. Fast forward 25 years, what we realized in this particular sector is that a lot of opportunities have opened up in terms of the quantity of production that needs to be made. We went down from 30,000 copies to a single copy that can be produced. Personalization became big and became available, and the amount of jobs that are there today for the industry as a whole is much, much greater than it used to be in the past. So we are embracing the change. We are believing that it is an important basis for us to grow, specifically in our mining and industrial sector. Now, governments have to be prepared. It's not going to be something that we have to watch and it will happen by itself. Government has a role and private sector has a role. Government has a clear role. I think three things they need to focus on: infrastructure, regulation, and skilling of their labor force. With regards to infrastructure, I think the country here has done a great job. I mean, the pandemic was a great test to our infrastructure. What we have done in the last 5-6 years is probably equivalent to something that could be done in 20 years. We were ready, and that's why during the pandemic, we didn't face any challenges in the healthcare, in education, in our business and government. So we are ready with the infrastructure side, but we need to continue. This is an ongoing issue. Secondly, with regard to regulation and policy, governments need to be adapting to regulations and policies that encourage people to invest in technology, that are encouraging people to use advanced manufacturing, for example, as a way of moving forward. AI, 3D printing, we need to be agile as we can to ensure that our country is moving also without any obstacles from a government point of view. And third, which is really the most important, is the reskilling of our national workforce for the existing workforce, but most importantly for the future. And that's why the government have announced the Human Capital Development Program, which is headed by His Royal Highness, and I'm proud to be a member of this program, and it is even beyond just the three ministers you have mentioned, but definitely the education minister is responsible for the overall performance of the program. The labor minister is aggregating the demand. We as sectors, we are the users, so it's a collective effort of the government to ensure that we skill our future workforce to be ready for the future jobs, to be innovative, disruptive technologies are always helpful for people like us who would like to, leapfrog, and that's a great opportunity for us to do so.
Okay, that's a very good overview. So let's have a little bit of the debate between the Estonian model and what Saudi Arabia is out to achieve, right? And we have about 15 minutes left. Kersti, you're a big proponent of letting the market determine. This is very interesting because if you follow the money, you can gravitate to the space and then the labor market adjusts. So number one, you believe in the market forces, but what is the role of government as the market starts to determine where the demand is?
Well, the role of the market, of course, is the creation. The role of the government is to create the market, as always. I mean, we know markets do not just happen like themselves. For example, in higher education model, we let our universities, even state-owned universities, compete against each other, and also, compete towards the market offer, which means that if there is a demand on the market, for example, which has been now evident for engineers, ICT specialists, they all expand their offer in this area, and students having realized who gets the best salaries in the country actually gravitate to these science, which is obvious. But of course, markets have also a certain lag, and to create a sector, it's always a little bit of an egg and the chicken problem in this case. But if markets are open not only within a country but globally, then it actually might tide you over during this period while the market signal reaches. Because if you are front runner like Estonia, we get from ICT as big part of our GDP as from agriculture. We have 7 unicorns, but our population is 1 million, slightly more than 700,000 people work in Estonia. And of course, these unicorns need a lot of workforce. Only one of them, I know, the others are not so job intensive, but they hire 300,000 people globally. So it's extremely important that you also have global accessibility to workforce. So Estonian companies create jobs equivalent to the size, what is our own workable population outside of Estonia. And this means that our economy actually can serve the rest of the world quite well as well in job creation, which shows you that these new technologies, they do not ruin jobs. They rather, creative in this format. Of course, Estonian universities teach more ICT. Our students graduate to the job market, but still, we are still 1 million. Which means that our unicorns, and there will be more, I'm afraid, than the 7 we already have, they need to keep working outside. And now here is my biggest worry of 21st century. We have taken quite long to make sure that our goods markets could be more or less free, and we know they aren't. They really aren't. If you look at disputes at WTO or all these things, they aren't. Global services market today is free. I can hire designers from wherever, globally. Nobody protects their market nor their, labor from working elsewhere.
Right.
But, if this happens that, for example, we start limiting access to data, and let's say, nobody in Europe wants anybody from outside to work on our data, so this market will be broken. And I see this as one of the biggest role of small open economies who demand labor from the global market to keep this global services market open. So our problem is not at all unemployment. Our problem is, please let us have access to the workforce which is unemployed somewhere else. But we can provide them with basic skill set because digital jobs are not so difficult at all, as I demonstrated, and we can employ them. And then we have a global moral issue, I find, because we want to share the social benefits people are creating with the government, where they're coming from. And we need this kind of global transfer mechanisms, which we do not have today at all.
Before I go back to His Excellency, I would like to ask you this question. Because of what we've seen now with the US considering and Europe considering quite tough legislation, because almost the behemoths have, the horses left the barn, if I can use that analogy, and they're trying to catch up on regulation. So the trend is not what you're talking about, it's quite different.
It isn't. Regulation is necessary, but it has to be permissive. For example, yes, in Europe, everybody has the right to have a digital ID to identify themselves when they are accessing data sets. In Estonia, nobody can access data sets without identifying themselves. It's encrypted point to point, and totally safe because government guarantees your digital ID like they do analog passports.
Right.
And we also offer e-residency, which means that citizens of the third countries and other European countries can all have an Estonian ID card, which gives them the right to participate in our digital ecosystem. This way it is regulated, safe, encrypted, but permissive. It can be done.
No, it's very interesting. You haven't thought that far down the road yet, I wouldn't imagine, right? Because the Saudi market is the largest economy in the region, and you have the building blocks for the skills. Do you need to reach out, or do you have the skills here, would you suggest, Minister?
No, I mean, we will always reach out. It's the quality of what we are reaching out to. Today, if we look at our labor force and how it is split, I mean, the low labor force is, or the low-skilled labor force is the labor force that's going to be moving and changing. I mean, we also believe in market dynamics, but you know, I have also a background in economy, and I know by fact governments need also to shift, need to show the direction, because today if we look at Saudi Arabia and the ambitions of the growth that we are trying to do, we cannot just stay idle as a government. We need to act to show the private sector what are we actually targeting, what is the demand coming from, where we see the technology being utilized, where we see our workforce being better used, where we see our resources better used. On the private sector side, I think it's very important to have a private sector that is also open-minded, they are willing to change, they attract the right crowd to ensure that within the organization, especially organizations that have been in, have a legacy of traditional businesses but need to also grow. And thirdly, they need to be ready for change, embrace change. I am a big believer that a private sector government collaboration is very important at this stage for Saudi Arabia to move. I will just give you one example. Today, when we look at our industrial strategy is built on 3 pillars. One is resilience. Secondly, is being a regional player in selected products. And thirdly, we want to be also a leader in some technologies. We cannot do these different things without planning exactly what kind of workforce we would like. In the resilience side, we are having specific targets with regards to healthcare, for example, in manufacturing of healthcare, in medicines, in biotechnologies, in vaccines, and in medical equipment. All of these plans will need to have a proper labor force, and we intend to also do these projects taking into account the latest technology, advancing technologies we want to build for the future, because we see that Saudi Arabia has a great potential not to be a local producer for its own demand, but in many products we can be a hub for the world, for the region. Our geographical location is excellent. We are investing a lot of money in the logistics side, in making sure that the country actually gets benefit of the location. Also, our abundance of different minerals and resources are key for us to plan. So I think there is no disconnect. I come from the private sector. I've just been in office 2 years, and I learned one thing. In the private sector, it's easy to see a company in the US or in Europe and try to copy. In the public sector, you cannot copy another country. You can just learn.
Okay, we only have time for one more question. I'm going to just have the one question to the two of you, because I think this audience would really like to know, what's the right education for the future? I mean, give us the Estonia example, and what did you find during the pandemic in the education system, what's working, what's not working? Kersti?
For more and more, I realized that, when we grew up, We had to learn tech skills, and social skills came by themselves. I mean, just by getting along, not offending people, and getting what you want to get.
Yeah.
Nowadays, our children need to learn these social skills as a special skill. They get the tech skills themselves. And therefore, teaching them to be a compassionate human being and a responsible member of the society is much more important than trying to predict what kind of technological space they will use these skills on, which is a very, well, good idea, because, you know, this we know they would need anyway.
Right.
What tech they will use, we don't know. Today's is Stone Age anyway when they graduate. So teach them to be responsible citizen, compassionate human being. This is what we need to do more and more. It's counterintuitive, but this is very important.
So decency is important throughout. What did we find during the pandemic about what's working in education? You said you're impressed by the engineering, the STEM work. We're getting women empowered like crazy here in the kingdom. What did you learn about what needs to be built, though, next?
What I can say is that the track record of the country in terms of education is great. When we look at professions such as the medical profession, we have great physicians. They are some of them are actually world class, working in many countries such as Canada and the US. And in engineering also, I mean, companies like Aramco or SABIC, we could not imagine that these companies with their complexity of business model would actually reach where they are today without the right skills. I think what we lack is really directing the direction of where we want to go, and that's exactly what we are trying to do with this program. But probably if I want to also elaborate on the question is what needs to be taught in the future. Maybe it's a cliche, but this is the truth of the matter. You know, change is going to be always there. We need to educate our children to be ready for change, to be always embracing change. It's a phenomena that will continue. Change has always been happening, but only the cycle is just becoming much faster. So we need to educate our children to be more motivated and creative. And that is the only way where we can ensure that they will always find room in their community.
Great, that's very interesting. And a spiritual way to finish our roundtable from both of you. Kersti Kaljulaid, the former president of Estonia, also working in the UN on women and children now, the very key issue. And Bandar Alkhorayef, the Minister of Industry and Minerals. Nice round of applause for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.